Hi, in this video I'm going to explain to you a little bit about brainwaves and how those brainwaves affect your meditative state and the impact that meditation can have on you that may surprise you. A lot of people think, well, yeah, of course it's good to meditate because it reduces stress levels, reduces cortisol levels, can increase creativity, blah 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 blah, can be good for addiction, make people happier and all that. And that is all true. But it can do actually a lot more for you than you may be aware of. But first I'm going to give you a quick summary of brainwaves and what they are. We have the delta, which is actually the slowest brainwave. That's when you're completely unconscious and asleep and you're not dreaming, you're not doing anything. The second is theta. Theta brainwaves are a little slightly more active, and a lot of times hypnotists try to work in the theta range when they're giving hypnotic suggestions. Sometimes you'll have dreams in the theta zone, depending. In fact, you may have dreams in theta or in alpha, both. Depending a little bit, you know those dreams that you have that you're half awake and half asleep? Those may be more towards the alpha state. But in theta, you're largely unconscious, but your brain is active and the brain waves are slow. Alpha, there's a little bit more activity and a lot of creativity and creative ideas come out of alpha. Albert Einstein was famous to sleep with a ball in his hand that had a bell in it. And he would take a nap for about 10 or 15 minutes. And when he would fall asleep just enough, and the ball would fall out of his hand and hit the floor, it would ring and wake him up. And he said this a lot of times would inspire him with like creative ideas when he was working on his physics formulas. The next is beta. Beta is hopefully the state I'm in now because I'm speaking to you. So beta is when you're active waking state. Maybe we're reading books, we're talking to people, we're involved in activity, right? But there is a second type of beta that you should be aware of. And that second type of beta is like when you're in a fight, flight, or freeze scenario where you're extra stressed. So the brain waves actually, the hertz actually go up and you're in this high beta state. And then there's one more, which is gamma, and that's the one we're going to be talking about in this video. Gamma is extremely fast. It was discovered, gamma waves, maybe about 30 years ago, and since that time there's been a lot of research done by Tibetan monks. They've worked with the Dalai Lama, with Matt Ricard, which we'll speak about in a moment. There's been a lot of research done by Richard Davidson from the University of Wisconsin. I'd like to bring up one point. Alpha state, a lot of times you will experience it maybe when you're watching TV and you're completely zoned out, or you're driving your car and you're driving home and you're not even thinking about driving the route or anything, you just kind of do it like an automatic pilot. That could be an alpha state. Advertisers oftentimes target us in the alpha state when we're watching a movie because they know we're a bit zoned out and it's easier to access the subconscious mind to help motivate you or persuade you to buy their product or service. So this professor, he's a professor of psychology and psychiatry at the University of Wisconsin, and his name is Richard Davidson. He works also with Daniel Goleman, who's the famous emotional intelligence expert, and he was doing some work with some research with Matthew Ricard, considered the world's happiest man. So what they did is they wired up Matteo with EEG measurements. And with these measurements, what they did with these things is they measured his brain and his brainwave activity while he was meditating. So what did they discover in this study? Well, they discovered that his gamma activity was extremely high, extraordinarily much higher than the average human being. In fact, they brought several hundred meditators to Wisconsin to study, and they found that all these meditators had much higher levels of gamma activity. Now, this is science-based, right? And I'm going to go on one further. We'll talk a little bit about atoms, and this is going to be touching on quantum physics. And I'm not a physicist, but I have been studying physics for a number of years, and I took courses in university. I was lucky enough to study with a famous professor by the name of John Hagelin, who's an ex-Harvard alumni, and he's quite prestigious and quite well known. Anyway, we know that atoms in solid matter vibrate very slowly, okay? We do know that in a liquid, atoms vibrate a little bit quicker. And we know in a gas, like in oxygen or something, they vibrate even that much more quickly. So my thinking is, if that's the case, and we know that our brain waves can vibrate very, very quickly, people talk about law of attraction and manifesting stuff and things like that. Is it possible? And this is a question, I'd like to hear your comments. Is it possible, if the brain waves are vibrating very quickly at the same velocity as the atoms are, Would that make it easier perhaps to manifest certain types of circumstances in our lives where we have better quality lives, happier lives, or, well, it could be the contrary as well? That's my question to you. And what I ask you today is, why not try practicing meditation every day for just 3 minutes? It's shown to increase happiness, reduce loneliness, which a lot of people in the current circumstances with the coronavirus and the pandemic are suffering. It reduces the feeling of isolation. It increases people's happiness. We also know from studies that were done in the 70s and 80s in Washington, D.C., they found that the square root of 1% of a population meditating collectively at the same time had an impact on the crime rate and life quality of those people in that geographical area. The study was repeated again in Iowa, and it has been repeated multiple other times. One of the persons that was involved in some of these research studies was, again, John Hagelin of Harvard University. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear your opinions. Send us a comment and let us know what you're thinking. And have a fantastic day, as always.